Hello, and welcome to the second video in our how-to series, How to Write at University. This video will focus on planning an outline. Okay, so this diagram represents a piece of academic writing, and you can download this template from our website or create your own version to help you plan your work. In this video I'm just going to briefly talk you through the sections and give you an illustration of how you might use this kind of template to plan out your work. So you'll notice at the top of the diagram we have a grey rectangle labelled Introduction. And obviously this represents the introduction you would expect to find at the beginning of almost any piece of academic writing. Then we have the main body and the conclusion. We'll come to those in a moment. Now the structure and content of introductions will vary widely. However, if you're unsure about what to include, it is worth thinking about the core function this section of writing serves. Firstly, the introduction should demonstrate that you have some understanding of the context in which the discussion in the essay or report takes place. And this often gets called background, but you'd only usually mention any historical detail which is still highly relevant today. It's normally sufficient to focus on recent relevant developments to set the scene for the rest of the essay. The introduction then has the function of preparing the reader for the structure of the main body of the text. It's often an opportunity to reassure a marker that you've understood the task you've been set. This essay or report will first outline X, it will then go on to analyse the causes of Y and will conclude with a discussion of Z, or something along those lines. And finally, for any kind of discursive writing, where you've been asked to reach and justify some kind of conclusion about something, it may be sensible to provide a summary of your conclusion right at the start. This enables your reader to evaluate the subsequent points you make in the light of this central argument. It also means you can explicitly link back to this central argument or thesis throughout your writing. Academic writing in the UK tends to favour this kind of transparency. It's usually not expected that you would save your conclusion to the end as if it were a punchline to a joke or the twist at the end of a thriller. Okay, so if we look at the bottom of the screen now, and if we immediately think about the function of the conclusion, you may notice there's some similarity. So, first of all, you need to remind your reader of the central conclusion or conclusions you have presented in response to the question or task. You need to highlight the points you've made, which you think provide the most persuasive support for this conclusion. Maybe reminding the reader of one aspect of a case study which was surprising, or the results of a study which you felt justified a particular position you've adopted on one of the elements covered. And finally, in a mirror image of the background or context you provided at the start, you may wish to finish by suggesting some kind of recommendation or prediction which focuses the reader on the immediate future. This might not be appropriate. I can think of lots of examples where there might not be scope for this, but it does give the essay or report a kind of symmetry and locates it securely in the real world. Developing your confidence in producing good quality introductions and conclusions that are appropriate for your specific course, subject area, is one of the things that the writing support which operates from the Bridge can help with. So come along and talk to us if that's something you want to work on. Right, so now we move on to focus on the main event, the main body of your essay. And unfortunately, I can't give an outline for this section in perhaps the same way as for the introduction and conclusion. Organising your main body is a creative task with infinite possibilities. However, we can highlight some of the most basic functions of this section. It's the place where you put all your paragraphs, and therefore it's the place where you put your ideas. One main idea per paragraph only is the rule, and each idea you present in your main body should be linked in some kind of clear and logical way to the task you've been set. It should link somehow to the paragraph before it and the paragraph that comes after it, and it should link directly and explicitly to evidence and theory gathered from the available literature. Now, we can leave the linking between paragraphs for now. This is something you will sort out properly at the detailed plan and drafting stage of the writing process. The writing process is outlined in the first video in this series. In this video, we're just thinking about a preliminary plan. So the first question I want us to focus on is this: how many paragraphs should we include, or to put it another way, how many main ideas should we be able to fit into finished assignment. And you'll notice here that we've included rough percentages for each section. So the introduction, we've got 5 to 10%, the conclusion 5%, and over on the right hand of the screen you'll see therefore the main body would be 85 to 90% of the available word count. Now these percentages are very rough indeed, but I think if you're looking for a place to start, then these are reasonable starting points. But you'll then need to seek feedback and advice from the people marking your work to develop a clear idea for yourself of what the expectations are on your course. But let's look at how we might use our word count to estimate the number of paragraphs in a piece of writing using this example. So imagine we've been set a 2,000 word discursive essay on coffee culture, coffee drinking in the UK. Right, we've got 2,000 words. Now usually the word count would be provided with some leeway. So plus or minus 10% is the standard. So that would give you somewhere between 1,800 and 2,200 words. Now we've said 5 to 10% for an introduction, so let's stick with that. That would be somewhere between 100 and 200 words. And let's say, I mean, it says 5% over leaf on the previous slide, but let's say 100 to 200 words for a conclusion. So we're going to be left with a main body somewhere in the region, quite a wide latitude, isn't it? So somewhere in the region of 1,400 to 2,000 words in our main body. If we've got a tight, really short introduction, really tight conclusion, and we then use the maximum leeway on our total word count, we could get up to 2,000 words. And if we're bulking it up with a big long discussion in the intro and the conclusion, and we go to the lower end of that minus 10% leeway, then we'd end up with a bottom end of 1,400 words. So we've got that kind of scope. Now, in order to work out the number of paragraphs, we need to think about how many words there'd be in a paragraph. And obviously this is a pretty open question. There is no rule here at all. But I suppose from a purely planning point of view, and based on experience of 10 years plus looking at students writing, good quality and less good quality, you know, a real ballpark figure for an average paragraph length might be somewhere in the region of 150 to 200 words. Many good paragraphs could be shorter, many good paragraphs could be longer, but let's take that as a sort of average, and I'm comfortable with that as a starting point. So if that's true, then the main body of our essay might include anywhere between 7 and 13 paragraphs. Okay. Now, my instinct is to narrow it down a little bit. I'd be thinking somewhere between 8 and 12 paragraphs, I suppose. That's how it feels to me, a 2,000 word essay. So, once I've worked all of that out, how can I develop a preliminary plan? Well, here we go. So this is a slightly developed table based on the template that you can download. All it does is includes a column for references as well. And I've got 10 paragraphs for this coffee essay, smack in the middle of 7 and 13, or even 8 and 12. So we're starting to plan this essay with 10 paragraphs as being some kind of reasonable starting point. We don't know how many we'll end up with, but it's going to be somewhere in that region. Okay, so I've done some responding to the question already, and I've got a few ideas that I think I'm likely to want to include. So here we go. I want to include something about the fact that the UK traditionally was a tea drinking nation, and that this was due to our historical trading relationships. And I know enough here to predict that the kind of examples that would be appropriate here might be to look at our relationship with India, relationship with China, both big tea exporting countries, and also maybe do a comparison with other European countries, Italy, Spain and France, that had historical trading relationships and empires that included countries where coffee is grown, so look at that difference there. So I've done a little bit of reading, and I have identified straight away that there are some sources that can help me with each of these different comparisons. So I've plugged in some early references, and here I've got a pretty good preliminary plan for a possible background paragraph to get me started. Now, not all essays need a background paragraph like this in the main body. You may be able to cover it in your introduction. But for now, I'm thinking it might be nice to have one in this essay, so I've noted the key elements for now. And I've got everything there that I'd need to build on when it comes time for a more detailed plan. Right, so I've got an idea that I want to talk about cultural influence. But this is a massive topic, and I want to go into a little bit of depth. So I'm going to spread that over 2 paragraphs, I think, at this stage. One on the influence of our neighbouring European countries, and another on the influence of American culture. Notice that each paragraph still has its own very distinct point to make. And if I wanted to be more superficial, I could deal with cultural influence in one paragraph only, and I could skirt between EU and US cultural influence just within one paragraph, leaving me more paragraphs to talk about other topics. And then I'd be getting more breadth, covering more different topics, but providing less depth. I wouldn't be going into so much detail. Here it is, I've broken it down over 2 paragraphs, which gives me a bit more depth. If cultural influence on changing dietary habits was the focus of the whole essay, then I'd need to break down the topic much more than I have here, obviously. So I think I want to include, I remember from one of the lectures that that globalization is relevant here. So I want to develop a discussion of globalization in general, and bring in the topics of migration of people to the UK and the arrival of big coffee brands on our high street and in our supermarkets. I want to talk about how this process has grown the domestic market. More people now drink coffee and visit coffee shops than before. And then I want to look at recent trends in the market that have sought to target different consumers and develop the market further. So the idea of artisan coffee and artisan coffee houses and that kind of thing. So these are just my early ideas here. A couple of examples there of possible brands. I promise this is not my specialist subject. If it's yours, you'll have spotted that already. This is just some preliminary ideas, and there are lots and lots of gaps. But what I've got here is a working document that I can use to start to target my reading. I'm now looking for sources which include reference to pretty specific topics, and I've got some ideas about those topics that I'll be looking to check. I'm prepared to completely change my ideas and my approach to the answer I'm preparing, but I've given myself a starting point, and as I add new ideas, I'll notice when I have too much for the available word count, and I'll be prompted to make decisions as I go along about what I may want to leave out and what I might want to keep in. So it reduces my chance of trying to cram more than one idea into a paragraph, which is a common structural problem, particularly when people have written, when they've read huge amounts and developed huge loads of notes, and they want to try and cram it all in, and so they end up cramming more than one idea into each paragraph. And this kind of plan sort of stops you from preparing in a way that would lead to that. And it also, if I'm prone to maybe not quite reading enough, it highlights really clearly any areas where I'm lacking support or lacking ideas. You know, it shows me that I don't just need to make a point, I need to have supporting ideas, I need to have examples. And if I've just got an example, what point am I trying to make about that example? What am I trying to say? And if I don't have any kind of supporting reference, I know that I'm going to need to go and find it. Because remember, what we're looking to develop for each paragraph is one central idea plus some support for that idea. So that could be examples, some kind of explanation that develops the point, statistical evidence that supports it. It could be paraphrased or summarized or even quoted directly, material from authority or from reliable text. These come from, we need some of this in every paragraph usually to come from relevant and reliable sources, and we're usually looking to try and include some of our own comments. Now if you want to develop a better understanding of this, You might want to look at the video we've done comparing facts, opinions and claims and arguments. So there's a separate video that includes a discussion of these different types of statements to develop your understanding of what kind of material you want to include from other people's writings and what kind of comments you might want to make yourself. Okay, for more help with your academic writing and a range of other skills, visit the following. And thank you for listening.